From our studios this week in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip from Gantom Lighting and Controls. I'm joined, as always, by my delightful co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. On Green Tag, we look at the top news each week and explain why it matters to industry professionals. And this week, we're going to be talking about Glenwood Caverns and what it means for the rest of the theme park industry. First, though, we're going to reply to a few comments from last week's video. Last week, we talked about Six Flags and about the new pass structure.
Wait, we never talk about Six Flags. When did we talk about Six Flags? I don't remember that.
It all blurs, at some point.
We always seem to talk about Six Flags. There's that.
So I think the most, there's a few very good, insightful comments last week. One was from G. Robble, who comments every week, but his was particularly about how the new pass system could allow them to raise prices for the gold passes, because then it becomes a regional pass. So it could be priced a little bit higher. And then if the value sensitive people could still just buy the single park pass as normal. So it does create that. I think that was an excellent point. We did not talk about that at all, but
no, that's a really good, that's exactly the kind of comments we love to hear. Actually, we love to hear all comments, whether they agree with us or don't. And that particular one kind of took the door that we had opened, they walked through it and explored it a bit further, which we like even more.
Yep.
In that particular case, I think that is a perfect example of dynamic pricing based on what is the value of the region. Not necessarily based on how many tickets are sold, but based on the value of the region.
That's right.
And that kind of dynamic pricing, it's sort of like we used in the show. We actually used the comparison to airlines when we talked about dynamic pricing, and it's why, for example, in many cases with many airlines, you can get a cheaper flight to Las Vegas than you can to someplace equally as far away, but that doesn't want to drive tourism. So that's the same mentality, that you can charge more for a region that has higher rated or more robust parks.
Yep. Yeah, that's excellent. That's an excellent thought. Another comment that we got put out some things that we also didn't talk about last week when it comes to the people upgrading from the gold plus all access to prestige. So Six Flags announced they were upgrading those people that had bought the gold plus the all access up to prestige automatically. Mm-hmm. A lot of the prestige pass holders kind of clarified why it was upsetting to them in a way I didn't think of, which is that a lot of the prestige benefits are benefits that are impacted negatively by more prestige pass holders. So that would be the lounges, where there's more people, there's less places sitting, the fast track lanes having more people in them, and of course stuff like parking lines for preferred parking, or just preferred parking running out. So on popular days. So, and basically the prestige pass holders are arguing that if there's going to be suddenly a lot more prestige pass holders, then those particular benefits, which is kind of the reason they paid the twice as much during the sale, is that those benefits, the value of them is going to be reduced. So that's a valid concern that we did not address last week.
Mm-hmm. I think it is a very valid concern. I think it is somewhat hypothetical, although I realize some of them gave examples of, when they did a sale in the past that that this happened and it got more blah 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 blah. I myself have experienced something very similar when Busch Gardens Tampa, the very first time they did Fun Card, which was basically pay for a day, come back all year. Yep. We had record-breaking attendance, but we also had some of the worst guest experience surveys that we've ever had, because again, the park was not ready for it. Yep. So I think that is the important thing that this discussion or these comments open, is the discussion of we are now talking somewhat hypothetical. It is hypothetical based on previous experience, which is, logical. It's a very logical assumption, but it's logical only if you assume that the park is not going to make any upgrades. Yep. If the park is not going to operationally change anything in order to handle the additional folks. And I don't know, they may not be. But if that's the case, then you as prestige pass holders have a couple of choices. Number one, if you have a specific experience, not just a hypothetical, this could happen if, but if you have a specific experience that is less than your perceived value of that pass, you need to contact the parks immediately so that they know, our prestige pass holders are pissed. so that they can make those changes. They can operate. They can make those operational changes, because everything that is described here. Preferred parking, not enough preferred parking, longer lines on Fast Pass, and no seating in lounges, those kinds of things. Those are all things that are relatively easy to change from an operational standpoint. And if they don't know that these things need to be expanded, which I think they do. Like parking is a perfect example. Preferred parking, they move the stanchions, they move the barricades so that there is more preferred parking. It may be 8 spaces further away than before. Yes, that is true. But that's also because when you renew your whatever it's called now pass, your top of the line pass, next time you're not going to pay the full price that you paid for it the first time anyway. So it's going to save you money. But I do think that all of the concerns, very valid, very, very valid. So it's not just a financial issue. It is an actual experiential issue, which I think is really important when we talk about theme parks. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. But I also think that these are all operational situations that can, if the park is aware that people are upset about it, can address relatively quickly.
Yep.
And again, they don't necessarily want to lose those high-end pass members. They also don't want negative comments out there. More importantly, they don't want negative comments out there about their parks or about their guest experience, no matter what level your pass is. So thank you so much for sharing that and for bringing it to the surface in this discussion. I still, to a certain extent, stand by my dynamic pricing comments, in the fact that pricing of everything changes. And some are very obvious, like the airlines that we just mentioned. Others are not, like food prices, which change constantly based on need and basic supply and demand. And sometimes just, hey, I have an opportunity to gouge somebody because there's a natural disaster coming. Let's charge 3 times for a generator what we charged before. So those things happen all the time. And I think that, if you are unhappy with the actual experience, and I urge you to actually have specific experiences where I came last week, I waited 2 minutes to park, and this week I waited 30 minutes to park in preferred. Make the parks aware of that, because again, these operational changes, having worked in many parks, these operational changes are not difficult. They can be made quickly, and if enough people make the park aware that there is a problem, it is in the park's best interest to do it. Now, notice how I phrased that. I didn't say they would. I said it is in the park's best interest to do that.
I think. But
the idea of dynamic pricing is still something that is going on all the time, and that probably is not going to change. But guest experience, if you are undersatisfied based on the pass holder or the pass holder benefits that you have been promised, then you need to make the parks aware of that.
Yeah, I think Scott is pointing out here kind of the difference between corporate, which is deciding these policy changes, and then the individual operations teams at the parks, which can actually make changes to ideally make things better if they're aware of it. So it's kind of like they don't really need to ask for permission to move stanchions and to fix some of these operationally things, but they have no choice, right? Like really the parks operations team members that are on the front lines don't have it. They didn't choose to allow this many extra prestige people. It wasn't their choice. And so by bringing it up to them, you kind of give them the ability to solve a problem. You also give them data, which they can then turn over to, actual complaints that they have received, which helps give them ammunition to fight back against some of these things, I think.
And the individual park presidents or park leaders can go back to the corporate entities and say, we need X number of dollars. We recognize that we have this many top line pass holders who generate X amount of revenue, and we are unable to provide them with these benefits that have been promised them. We need X amount in capital dollars to expand the VIP lounge. I'm not going to say double the parking, because I've not been to a brick and mortar theme park that has run out of parking in 15 years. You may be out in the South 40. I agree, but again, preferred parking means you are in front of everybody else. So they just move that. They just keep moving people further and further out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, okay, let's move on to Glenwood Caverns. This was a big story because Glenwood Caverns has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And this, of course, we've been reporting on this since it happened, actually.
That was what, 2021?
Yes. So in September, a Colorado jury found the theme park negligent in the death of the 6-year-old girl who fell from one of its rides. The park currently hosts about 200,000 visitors a year, and their annual gross revenue is about 14 to 16 million. So it's a small park. I've been there, actually. So this is another reason why I'm so interested in this story, because I've been to this park. I've gone on the ride in question before it was rethemed into the Crystal Caverns. I've seen the mechanism and all these items, and it's a very small park and like on a mountaintop in Colorado. Okay, it's a small regional park. 200,000 people is not that many people. Okay, so this is the context, and we've been following this since the original death occurred, and then of course recently in September when they were negligent. So here's what has happened though recently. Okay, so to kind of set everything, and I think what we really want to get to is discussing why this is important, but let me get the facts down first. So on February 9th, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy court in the district in Delaware. And what happened was the filing was precipitated by a $116 million final judgment entered against the park in November. So originally, the original verdict was $205 million. The judge reduced it to $116 million, which is roughly half in compensatory and half in punitive damages. And what happened is a reason it was allowed to hit $116 million, and this is like, I think this is the part to highlight for us in the theme park world. The reason it was allowed to go above the normal cap, which normally there's a cap on these types of massive damages, and they used a felonious killing exemption. So typically Colorado law caps non-economic damages, pain and suffering at a much lower amount. However, the trial judge ruled that the felonious killing exemption applied and that removed that cap. So the cap is removed, which means it allows this final amount of $116 million to be owed. So more context. I told you that the park makes like total revenue about $16 million a year, right? It already owes $12.7 million in debt. Okay, so now you add on this other debt, which is $116 million on top of what they already owe as unsecured debt. Okay, so if you're only bringing in $16 million, I can't imagine. You know, when I was looking through their financial records, 50% of that is operational and staff costs. Okay, so I mean, I'm sure Scott can do the math here. If they're bringing in $16 million, already half is operational, and then you minus out everything else, they're not making that much a year, right? And they already owed $12 million, and now they're going to owe an extra 16. So it's a death sentence, is what it is. That's what it is for the park. So what had happened over the last few months is that they were at a standstill after this $116 million judgment. They were at a standstill where they were trying to still negotiate. The negotiations clearly did not work because what happened is on February 9th, the family moved to seize the park's bank accounts, which is then why they filed for Chapter 11, because what that does is put a federal injunction to stop the family from being able to take the bank account money. So what happened next is this is where we can talk about the implications, because really none of the scenarios are excellent. You know, the best, probably the best one for everybody would be if in Chapter 11 it is reorganization, right? So the best thing would be if the park proposes a reorganization plan and it offers the family the $5 million that they have in insurance. And then it says, you know, something like over the next 20 years, we'll give you like 5% of profits, right? So then the family gets paid out over X amount of years. The park can stay open. And then the insurance, they lose their full insurance payout, the $5 million. That would kind of be probably the most money for the park. The situation B is that actually the family can, because the family is owed $116 million, right? So they're the largest proportion of unsecured debt. They can oppose the Chapter 11. And if they are successful and the judge agrees with them, it would go to Chapter 7, which means that the park would have to liquidate. So everything would just be sold and it would completely shut down. However, remember I mentioned they already owe over 12 million. So are you going to get more than 12 million for everything in the park? Like probably not, because the assets are like what? They're not, and the land, okay. So in that situation, the family might not get anything because the bank has to be paid first in terms of the waterfall payout. So it always goes to the secured debt first. So secured debt would be paid off first. So family may not get anything except maybe some of the insurance payout, but that'd be capped at 5 million. The only other situation would be potentially that they could change the ruling. They could appeal the court. They could appeal the ruling, the 116 million, maybe get it changed. Like they could try and reverse the felonious killing ruling, which I mentioned at the top, which would reduce the cap down to 10 million. And then the park maybe could get a loan for that and pay it off.
Less than that. It's less than that. I just looked it up. Looked it up.
10 million, yeah.
In cases filed on or after January 1st, 2025, Colorado's cap on non-economic damages in wrongful death actions increased to 2.125 million. So if it goes from 116 million to 2.125 million, the parks can survive.
They can survive.
The real according to the research that Philip has done and the little bits that I've done here, it's the felonious killing exception that basically destroyed the park.
That's right.
And this basically destroyed this whole thing. Because if they are ordered to pay 1.125 million to the family. Now, the actual economic damages, that has no cap. But death and dismemberment, wrongful
pain
death,
and suffering.
Pain and suffering, those kinds of things are capped in Colorado as of January of last year at 2.125. So the difference between 116 and 2.125 is rather significant.
Yeah, I think the only thing I think there is this, you're right on all that account. I think it's a little bit higher only because it was filed before that changed.
Okay, it raised on January 1st. It went up to 2.125. So if it was filed before that, then that cap is lower.
Yeah, so it would be even easier.
That cap is lower than 2 million.
Yeah, so, and I think this is exactly what Scott and I want to talk about because this is the crux. I think this is what the industry is watching because what this would do is set this precedent, right? If we take it in the Wayback Machine to talking about what actually happened, remember that she was not, the little girl was holding the seatbelt in her hand and the ride and her chair had not been cycled, right? So what happened was she got on, and instead of what's normally supposed to happen, okay, is that you unhook the seatbelt, the person sits into the seat, you put the seatbelt on, okay? So what happened was the little girl just went and sat down on the seat, and the seat was still buckled from the previous rider, and she held the excess over her, so it looked like that she was being seated correctly. So the ride vehicle sent a notification to the system saying that seat had not been cycled. Okay, so the operator saw that, and then the operator decided to reset the entire system and kind of override the safety. And that is the thing that is what they're saying constitutes felonious killing. Like that act of being like deliberately going against the whatever safety. And then they added other things too, like the training was not sufficient. They had mentioned how they hadn't had enough training. Like this was one of the first times this ride operator was using this operating. There wasn't enough on the job training. A lot of the stuff was not understood as to what the manual was. So all these things, they were like, this is what constitutes felonious killing. And I think for the industry, Scott's exactly right. Like this wouldn't have been a death sentence for this park if it weren't for this felonious killing ruling exemption. And the reason they're arguing that this is an exemption is because of the actions and the poor training. And I think that's where it becomes something for us in the industry to talk about is like, if this does proceed, if they're not able to appeal that exemption, then this sets a precedent out there for all regional parks of how well your ride operators are trained. I mean, this is a big difference. And so I think that to me, what do you think, Scott? I think that's the point here for us in the industry.
I agree 100%. First and foremost, obviously, everyone's hearts go out to this family who lost their child. That is a given. That really, I feel it needs to be said only because we're going to now talk a lot about industry and business and how companies and attractions can protect themselves from this. Yep. But we still lost a life, and that is a mournful situation, and we are very sorry for that. Secondly, there are parks out there or people who run parks who will argue and say, well, we can't find proper staffing. We can't find people other than,
that's right.
And I'm going to make a gross exaggeration, so I am not insulting anyone who falls into this category. But, we can only find 16-year-olds who are looking for a summer job.
That's right.
And I just, for those of you who are executives in the theme park industry, I want you to recognize in this particular situation, you're putting the lives of your guests
that's right.
into the hands of a 16-year-old. So you better, the first thing that is always cut from a budget is training.
Yep.
Almost always. Because it's an easy thing to say, well, they can read the manual, or we'll do the training online, or we'll have them sign something that says that they've read the SOPs. And then all of a sudden, this burden of $116 million leaves the park magically and goes to the 16-year-old who overrode the system. Useless. Yep. So it is. I've said it on this show. I've said it in almost every seminar I've ever talked about where we talk about safety, especially big in the Halloween industry, which, when I talk about haunted attractions. But I explain that one lawsuit can be the death of your park. And this is a perfect example.
This is a perfect example, yeah. And it was specifically the negligence. Scott's exactly right. Like this was brought up in the case of them being like, it was improper training. Like because I think there was a little bit of finger pointing, right? They were trying to blame the teenager. It was the teenager. Scott's right in this case. It was the teenager. And they were trying to blame the teenager. But when they went through the court case, they brought up that it was a lack of training. So it's not just, right. It's like 4 defendants, right? It's like, and it's the park just didn't do a good job training.
The only reason I mention that is because there are park owners who will say, then we're going to have to close things down because we can't find staffing to operate them.
Then you might need to. Yeah. I think let's talk more about that. I was thinking that when I was writing the show notes, and I was like, well, what else might happen? I think depending on whether or not they appeal this ruling, insurance might go up for regional parks also, just overall. And we've been seeing that trend for a long time. Even the Haunted Attraction Association mentioned that the single biggest threat going into 2026 is insurance costs, because people don't want to insure smaller attractions for reasons like this. So there's that. I also think it could also be a signal to ride manufacturers that they have to kind of like idiot-proof their systems, but also make more stringent like waivers that are like, if you're buying this ride, it's complete. You can't blame us for anything, basically, or it's like raising the stakes for the manufacturers as well, so they can have no. But I think it's also going to make it where potentially the rides are more expensive because the engineering has to be higher potentially to kind of reduce for some of these variables.
Was there any discussion in the suit, and you may not know, and I certainly don't know, about potentially going back against the ride manufacturer?
Yeah, so that was early. That was really early in it, but they kind of tossed it out pretty early because they're like, look, it's like you ignored the safety warning. Like the safety told you that there was a potential safety problem, and you reset the system. So you went against the manufacturer's use guidelines. But
so it's possible then that manufacturers may be required to omit the override.
Yes. And I think that, but I also think, if you remember when this first came out, Soaring Eagle was the company that did this. And it was not a good look. So like, even though they weren't really pulled in to where, they hadn't have a judgment against them, it's not just like with the drone people where the drone fell in Florida and hit that child in the chest and he required open, like these, you never want to be in the news for like that type of a situation. Correct. It might kill a brand, and so the damage is incalculable. So you're right. They might remove overrides altogether, or basically.
And if they remove overrides, what that's going to mean, let's look at that from, those of you who operate parks or have been part of a park ops team. If they remove overrides, that means they need to clear the station house. That means they need to reboot the entire system and then run, 3 to 5 test runs prior to. So that would mean that queues would get longer and longer. Guest satisfaction goes down. This is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, the most cost-effective and most actionable response to this is improve your training budget.
Yeah.
Improve your training budget. Let people know what the responsibility is that they're taking into their hands. Hold them responsible. Increase the pay for your supervisors so that you make certain, your frontline supervisors, so you can make certain. And yes, I know that that has a trickle up effect when it comes to profit margin. I understand that. But if you're in order to keep your insurance from skyrocketing, if these things continue to happen, and it may be too late, I don't know. But in order to keep your insurance from skyrocketing, you might want to have a 3 to 5% increase in what you're paying your frontline supervisors so that things like this don't happen.
Yep.
Or you're going to pay 2 or 3 times what you're paying now in insurance. And I know there are some parks that are so big they self-insure. I get that. But at the same time, 116 mil is an amount that is so far surpasses the anticipated caps for things.
That's right.
And if this precedent has been set, something goes wrong, somebody dies in your park, you have to close your doors.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I when I was digging more into it, so the answer is I was trying to get us an answer about insurance prices. I really was, but we were already sitting at 8 hours of research, kids, and that's getting a little much. So I didn't quite get us to an answer, but some of the preliminary research I came up with when I was starting to look at the actual disclosures from everybody is that this is a trend that has been happening in the US the last several years, where there's these catastrophic events that are anything over 50 million basically as a payout kind of triggers. And so what that does is it's causing insurance rates overall to rise for the tourism sector. And it's not just in theme parks, but it's kind of a larger trend. So I have some of the insurance people and a lot of the lawyers are talking about these events, are talking about how there's firms that will subsidize people to go in and to try and bust these cases open and so it's a whole thing. And we heard a lot of that in the haunted attraction state of the industry last year as well for haunted houses. So I will get back to everybody on exact numbers and details and whatnot, and I'll try and get a better answer as to how prices are raising or that. But I do think that it is real. We can say that it's real that prices are going up. So Scott's solution about the training may not prevent a current price hike for this year or next year, but I think what it does is it stops the worst case scenario. And you just have to invest in it. I don't know what to say. You just have to close the ride.
And the thing is, with any form of insurance, you can, to a certain level, especially if you're a large enough corporation, there's some negotiation there. And quite often, for example, as a homeowner, if you are paying a mortgage on your home, you are required by the mortgage holder to have mortgage insurance. Well, this could be a situation where if you are if you have insurance for your attraction, it may be that they require you to have a third party that comes in and does safety audits on a regular basis, not internal safety audits, external safety audits that report directly back to the insurance company. Because again, now, granted, insurance companies want to make money. I get that. Theme parks want to make money. I get that. But the bottom line is the bottom line, and that is if something like this happens, yes, it's a crapshoot. You're right. It's a crapshoot. Did anyone anticipate that this little girl was going to die 6 years ago? No. But it happened, and it, according to this court ruling, they believe that it happened due to negligence. So you've got to either address the negligence, or, as Philip said earlier, you've got to make it so that the equipment itself is 100% idiot-proof, which means that it's significantly less efficient in getting your guests through and having a great day. So I don't know whether there is a magic bullet answer here. In fact, I don't think there is. But I would say that the next time you have something in front of you, if you're sitting at a board meeting and you have a piece of a document in front of you that says we are exploring reducing training, vote it down. Because the safety of your guests is really what can protect the value and even the existence of your attraction. So, having said all of that and being really dramatic, unfortunately, we are out of time. So we are going to go for this week. Thank you again so much. I have to say it simply because if I don't, we get off the air and Philip says, hey, we forgot to tell them. So please subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Please, please, please. You have no idea. You have no idea how close we are. You have no idea how close. And again, is it us being greedy? Not really. It's just making us sustainable. If we could become monetized, even because we've been doing this for how many years and have yet to be monetized for much of anything, just to keep it going. That's the reason to do it. So thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments, as we said at the beginning. And on behalf of Philip Hernandez with Gantom Lighting and Control and myself, Scott Swenson with Scott Swenson Creative Development, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30, and we'll see you next week.